The Knicks are getting way too close to a championship, and honestly, that's starting to feel dangerous. Not just dangerous for the rest of the NBA either. We're talking dangerous for New York City itself. Because if the Knicks actually pull this off and win the title, the streets of New York might turn into complete chaos by sunrise. People are already losing their minds, and this run still isn't over. What makes this whole thing serious now is that the Knicks are no longer surviving off hype alone. This team is playing real winning basketball, and there's a legit argument that nobody in these playoffs has looked better overall. The numbers are wild, and this doesn't even look like the same offense we watched the last few years, where Jalen Brunson had to fight through double teams every possession just to keep them alive. There are 5 major things about this Knicks squad that people need to understand. The first 4 are the reasons their championship case suddenly feels very real, but the 5th one, that's where things get scary. First up, the raw numbers, because once you actually look at what New York has done in these playoffs, it almost doesn't look real. The Knicks are sitting at number 1 in net rating with a ridiculous plus 22.7. They also have the top offensive rating in the playoffs at 128.9, and defensively they're second at 106.1. Those are championship-level numbers across the board. Now, obviously, you still have to be careful with playoff stats because the sample size is smaller and matchups matter a lot. Atlanta never looked like they belonged on the same court with New York, and Philadelphia, even though many people expected a war, just never fully showed up the way fans thought they would. But even with that context, the Knicks' defense being this dominant is still impressive. And the offense? That part feels very real. When you watch this team now, it's not just one guy getting hot and saving everything at the last second. It's not Brunson running around trying to rescue broken possessions every trip down the floor anymore. The ball is moving fast, multiple players are touching it, and they're creating cleaner looks than we've seen from this franchise in years. That changes everything. Last season, even during that conference finals run, the offense still felt shaky at times because so much depended on Brunson creating magic out of nothing. Every possession looked stressful. This year feels different. Now it looks like the Knicks finally built an actual system around him instead of just throwing him into traffic and hoping he survives. That's a huge reason why this offense might honestly be the best remaining unit in the playoffs right now. And that leads directly into the second thing everybody needs to know, Jalen Brunson himself. Back in the 2023-24 playoffs, Brunson averaged 32.4 points per game while taking 26.2 shots every night, which led the entire postseason. That man was absolutely cooking defenders non-stop. But the problem was how hard every bucket looked. He shot just 48% effective field goal percentage because so many possessions turned into Brunson trying to carry the entire city on his back while defenders swarmed him from every angle. It was gritty, it was entertaining, but it also looked exhausting. Then last season, things started getting smoother. Brunson averaged 29.4 points on 21.8 shots while shooting 52% effective field goal percentage. The offense was still heavily built around him, but there were signs that the Knicks were finally moving towards something more balanced. It wasn't perfect yet, but you could see the shift starting to happen. Now look at this season. Brunson is averaging 27.4 points per game on only 20.2 shots while shooting 55% effective field goal percentage. The scoring is slightly lower, but that's actually the whole point. The Knicks no longer need him firing up 26 shots every single night just to survive. He's still the closer. He's still the guy you trust when the game gets tight late in the fourth quarter. But now the offense around him is finally helping carry the pressure instead of watching him do everything alone. And honestly, you can see the difference immediately when you look at the quality of his shots this year. Last season, Brunson's made playoff field goals came with him creating while handling the ball himself. A lot of those buckets were tough, contested, street fight type shots where he had to break defenders down possession after possession. This year, things look cleaner, smoother, and way more dangerous for the rest of the league. This year, that number has dropped all the way down to 56%, and that is a gigantic shift. Then it gets even crazier when you look deeper into the stats. According to Cleaning the Glass, Brunson had only 19% of his made shots assisted during last year's playoffs. This year, that number has exploded up to 36%. That jump changes everything about how this Knicks offense operates. Brunson hasn't become less valuable at all. He's just not trapped on an island anymore. Last season, whenever Brunson stood at the top of the floor with the ball, every defender already knew exactly what was coming. Teams loaded the paint, crowded his space, and basically forced him to attack an entire defense by himself while everybody else stood around watching. Now, the Knicks are finally making defenses move before Brunson even attacks. He's flying off screens, cutting without the ball, working through handoffs, even setting screens himself before getting the ball back. The defense is already rotating and scrambling by the time he catches it. That means he's attacking defenders who are off balance instead of charging straight into a wall every possession. That doesn't make Brunson weaker. It actually unlocks the best version of him. For the first time since he arrived in New York, he's operating inside a real offensive structure that's helping him instead of draining him. And honestly, that adjustment may have completely saved their playoff run. Because if you go back to the beginning of that Atlanta series, things were looking rough for a minute. The Knicks were down 2-1, the pressure was building fast, and people were already starting to whisper about another disappointing playoff collapse. It felt like New York was making the game way harder than it needed to be. Brunson kept forcing the issue against Dyson Daniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, two defenders who can make life miserable for guards. Meanwhile, Atlanta didn't even have real size available. Their tallest rotation player was only around 6'8", which should have been a giant advantage for Karl Anthony Towns. But instead of attacking that mismatch consistently, the Knicks kept running everything through Brunson and letting Atlanta load up defensively. Then something changed. New York finally stopped getting in its own way. They started feeding the actual mismatch, trusted the passing game more, and let Cat become a central piece of the offense. Suddenly, the floor opened up, the ball started popping around, and good shots turned into great shots. That's when this offense started looking scary instead of just talented. There's no debate that Brunson is still the engine of this team, but this year, the Knicks finally built him something functional around him instead of asking him to drag everything uphill by himself every night. And that brings us to the third thing people really need to understand. Karl Anthony Towns has completely reshaped this Knicks offense. As much as Brunson's role has evolved, and as much as the ball movement has improved, none of this works the same way without Cat. He's the piece that changes the geometry of the entire floor. Earlier in the season, this was actually one of the most frustrating things about watching New York. There were long stretches where Towns would basically disappear offensively, and fans were sitting there confused, wondering how that was even possible. This is one of the most skilled offensive big men in basketball. The Knicks traded for him specifically to raise the ceiling of the team, yet there were nights where it barely even felt like he was the third option offensively. That was always the real problem. It wasn't about KD lacking talent. The Knicks simply weren't putting him in spots where his skill set could fully shine. But now the offense finally makes sense, and Coach Mike Brown deserves a lot of credit for that adjustment. The biggest difference is where Towns is getting the ball. When Cat catches it at the top of the key, this offense becomes extremely dangerous. From there, he can see the whole floor like a quarterback. He can flow into dribble handoffs with Brunson, hit cutters slicing behind the defense, start pick and roll actions, or pull up from deep if defenders give him even a little space. That's what makes him such a nightmare matchup. If teams guard him with a traditional center, Cat drags that rim protector all the way out of the paint. Suddenly, the lane opens up, driving angles appear everywhere, and the defense gets stretched thin fast. And if the big defender steps up too aggressively, Towns can still put the ball on the floor and glide right past him. So then defenses try getting tricky by putting smaller defenders on him instead. But that creates another problem because Cat still has enough size, touch, and strength to punish smaller matchups too. He's forcing defenses into impossible choices possession after possession. And that's why his passing has become such a huge factor. Towns isn't touching the ball just looking to score every single time anymore. He's reading the floor, reacting to pressure, and making defenses panic the second they collapse toward him. Cat isn't just putting points on the board anymore. He's connecting the entire offense together. He's keeping possessions alive, triggering the next action, and creating flow instead of letting everything stall out. Most importantly, he's allowing Brunson to move around the floor freely instead of forcing him to attack 5 defenders by himself every single possession. And when your big man can shoot from deep, put the ball on the floor, throw smart passes, and basically run offense from the top of the key, your whole offensive ceiling changes overnight. That's the kind of versatility defenses hate dealing with because there's no easy answer for it. But honestly, one of the most impressive parts of this Knicks playoff run has been how much safer the team feels overall. The floor of the roster just looks higher now, and that brings us to the fourth thing people need to know. The Knicks role players are finally stepping up at exactly the right time. Coming into the playoffs, there were serious questions about several key pieces on this roster. Some guys looked shaky, confidence looked low, and the supporting cast felt unreliable. But now things are flipping fast. Mikal Bridges found his rhythm in round 1, and Miles McBride found his in round 2. Suddenly, the group around Brunson and Cade looks way more dangerous heading into the conference finals. Let's start with Bridges because early in that Atlanta series, things looked ugly. His confidence looked completely shot. He was bricking wide-open shots, struggling to find rhythm, and eventually it got so rough that he even started losing minutes. Knicks fans were getting frustrated fast. Then Game 6 happened. Bridges dropped 24 points in the closeout game, and from that moment on, it looked like the pressure disappeared. Ever since then, he's looked way more comfortable, aggressive, and locked in. Against Philadelphia, he averaged 17.5 points per game while shooting an absurd 69% effective field goal percentage, plus 1.8 steals on the defensive end. That's huge production from a player who looked completely lost just a short time earlier. Then there's Miles "Deuce" McBride, who basically had his own version of that breakout in round 2. Coming back from the hernia issue, his jumper looked shaky at first, and Mike Brown trying to use him as a primary point guard in round 1 just never felt natural. The offense looked clunky whenever he had to run too much creation himself. But next to Brunson, everything suddenly clicks. McBride's role becomes way cleaner when he can focus on spacing the floor, defending hard, and attacking openings instead of trying to orchestrate the whole offense. And the numbers with him and Brunson together are ridiculous. During these playoffs, the Brunson-McBride lineup has posted a massive plus 28.7 net rating, along with a 131.8 offensive rating and a 103.1 defensive rating. That's complete domination on both sides of the floor. Then came Game 4 against Philadelphia, where McBride absolutely caught fire and exploded for 25 points while shooting 7 for 10 from three-point range. Every single make came from deep, and the arena was going crazy. Meanwhile, Josh Hart is still doing all the gritty Josh Hart stuff fans love, diving for loose balls, crashing rebounds, pushing pace, and somehow playing with nonstop energy every minute he's on the court. Then Mitchell Robinson comes off the bench and immediately changes possessions with offensive rebounds and physicality around the rim. He's been an absolute monster on the glass again. But the biggest wildcard in all of this might honestly be OG Anunoby. Before the hamstring injury, OG was playing out of his mind. He was averaging 21.4 points per game while shooting a ridiculous 73% effective field goal percentage and an insane 54% from 3. Those numbers don't even look real for a player bringing elite defense too. And now there's real belief that he could return for Game 1 of the conference finals. If OG comes back healthy and looking like himself, both the ceiling and the safety net of this Knicks team rise immediately. Suddenly, New York isn't depending entirely on Brunson and KT to carry everything anymore. Bridges has found confidence again. McBride looks comfortable. Hart and Robinson are doing the dirty work. And OG returning could push this roster into another level entirely. That's why this team suddenly feels way deeper and more complete than earlier in the year. But now we get to the biggest thing people need to understand. And honestly, it's the reason I still can't go all in on the Knicks just yet. Because as good as this offense looks, and as much as New York has improved, there's still a major difference between looking like a contender and surviving a true championship-level matchup. Before jumping straight into finals talk, though, it's important not to completely ignore Detroit and Cleveland because neither team is just standing around waiting to lose. Detroit especially has actually given the Knicks serious problems this season. They've got the kind of length and athletic defenders that can make life uncomfortable for Brunson, especially with players like Ausar Thompson constantly pressuring him. And offensively, Detroit attacks New York in a very different way than Philadelphia did. The Pistons aren't forcing everything through a traditional big man. Their offense revolves around Cade Cunningham controlling the game, hunting switches, and attacking mismatches repeatedly. If Cade gets Brunson isolated enough times, things could get messy fast for New York's defense. Now, I still think the Knicks could counter that by throwing multiple defenders at Cade and daring the rest of Detroit's offense to beat them, especially considering how inconsistent the Pistons' offense has looked during stretches of these playoffs. But Cleveland is where things become even more interesting. The Cavaliers bring that double big setup with Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, and now with James Harden added into the mix, this matchup suddenly looks way more complicated than previous years. That changes everything for Cleveland, and after what they just did in Game 5 against Detroit, nobody should be treating them like an easy matchup anymore. That team looked focused, physical, and way more dangerous than people expected. But even with that said, the way the Knicks are playing right now makes me believe they should still beat either Cleveland or Detroit and reach the NBA Finals for the first time since 1999. Now, this is where the whole conversation shifts, because if New York actually gets to the finals and has to face Oklahoma City or San Antonio, I'm not going to fake confidence here. I wouldn't pick the Knicks in those matchups. I just wouldn't. That doesn't mean New York is fake or overrated. It simply means surviving the Eastern Conference is a completely different challenge from trying to beat the monster coming out of the West. Those are two totally different levels of basketball right now. The best way to explain it is through defense. Team defense-wise, the Knicks have honestly been excellent. Mike Brown has everybody locked in and committed. They're constantly switching coverages, changing looks, and adjusting on the fly. Cat can sit in drop coverage, step up high, hedge screens, blitz ball handlers, rotate hard, and force the ball into the hands of players New York is more willing to live with shooting. We saw that clearly against Philadelphia, and it absolutely worked. When the Sixers spammed those high pick and rolls with Tyrese Maxey, the Knicks did a great job showing high and taking away his pull-up threes. They forced the ball toward weaker perimeter shooters like Kelly Oubre and VJ Edgecombe instead. That was smart basketball, not luck. And honestly, Jalen Brunson deserves some credit here too, because his defensive effort has been much better than people usually give him credit for. He's competing harder, staying engaged, and trying to survive physically even when opponents target him repeatedly. But against Oklahoma City or San Antonio, that effort alone may not be enough, and that's where things get scary for New York. I thought Tyrese Maxey struggled at times reading the Knicks' defensive pressure during that series. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander probably wouldn't make those same mistakes. OKC has the kind of offense that can simplify the game down to one brutal question over and over again. Can your weakest defender survive against our best scorer? And against the Thunder, that weakest defender is probably Brunson. OKC would hunt that matchup non-stop. They'd strip the offense down, force switches, isolate Shai against Brunson, and attack relentlessly. That's where New York's defensive structure could start cracking under pressure. Because once you send extra help toward SGA, you're entering dangerous territory. Shai isn't just a scorer anymore. His playmaking has leveled up in a huge way. He'll pick apart double teams, hit cutters, spray passes to shooters, and punish rotations instantly. And the Thunder have athletes and shooters everywhere around him now. That means New York would need near-perfect defensive rotations behind every help defense. One late step, one missed rotation, one bad switch, and OKC makes you pay immediately. That's why this matchup feels like a nightmare for the Knicks. Their defense works best when all five guys are solving problems together. But if OKC isolates Brunson or even Cat repeatedly, suddenly the whole structure starts wobbling. Then there's San Antonio, which is a completely different type of headache altogether. The Spurs basically build a wall around the paint and dare teams to survive outside of it. Victor Wembanyama protects the rim like a security system nobody can bypass, while the other defenders run shooters off the three-point line and force teams into difficult mid-range shots. Now, to New York's credit, they actually do have players who can thrive in that kind of environment. Brunson is one of the best tough shot makers in basketball, and Bridges is comfortable pulling up from the mid-range too. Ball movement would become absolutely critical in this series because standing around and expecting one guy to save possessions against San Antonio is a losing strategy fast. The biggest wild card here is Cat. He completely changes the math of this matchup. If Towns plays center, Wembanyama would probably have to guard him directly, and that drags Victor away from the paint. Suddenly, the Spurs lose some of that terrifying rim protection because Cat can pull Wemby out to the perimeter, run offense from the top of the key, and launch above the break threes if defenders sag too far off him. That could seriously stress San Antonio's defense in ways most teams can't. But on the other side of the floor, Cat would also have to deal with guarding Victor himself, and that's where things could spiral quickly for New York. If Towns starts picking up fouls, which has definitely happened throughout his career, the entire matchup could flip fast. Wembanyama's size, length, and movement create non-stop pressure, and foul trouble for KTITA would completely change the balance of the series. Then you add Brunson having to battle a defender like Stephon Castle all game long, and suddenly every possession starts looking exhausting. Honestly, Cat versus Wemby might end up deciding the entire series if these teams ever meet. That matchup would be absolute chaos to watch. Overall, I think New York has a much cleaner path against San Antonio than they do against Oklahoma City. The Thunder matchup feels brutal because of the pressure SGA can create against weaker defenders and how dangerous OKC becomes once the rotations start breaking down. Against the Spurs, there's at least a clearer offensive blueprint for how New York could attack and survive. So yeah, I could absolutely talk myself into picking the Knicks over San Antonio in a finals matchup. But against OKC, that's where it gets really hard to believe New York could survive 4 full games of that pressure-packed attack.